Greg Sankey and the SEC want all the money.
This is Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it's time for the Atlanta Football Party, only on Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Atlanta Football Party, your home for the best Georgia Bulldogs football talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I am Tenitra Batiste, and alongside me are Jarvis Davis and Brian Gebhardt. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. And of course, our Atlanta Football Party is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, guys, the Dogs one-upped the Jackets again. We'll talk about it in Next Up, and Georgia's 2024 schedule really is the gauntlet. We'll go between the hedges to discuss. But first, let's talk about the SEC annual meetings wrap-up. As those meetings concluded on Thursday, Commissioner Greg Sankey acknowledged that while college athletics is in, quote, uncharted waters, he believes the NCAA Division I schools can continue to operate together, and his conference is prepared to, quote, take a leadership role as they all navigate historic change. He also said the NCAA basketball tournament in March is what binds D1 together, but if it's going to stay together, there are pressures that have to be recognized. So, Jarvis, I asked the question, what does the whole taking a leadership role really mean to you?
Bigger piece of the pie. We need more money. The Pac-12 should no longer exist. And Big Ten, yeah, we appreciate y'all. That's cute. Bless your little heart. Yeah, Michigan got a little natty last year. All that Jim Harbaugh, he gone. But yeah, give us that bread. We need the biggest cut of all. Like, yeah, I'm talking about 65-35. Everybody else, figure it out, from there.
Figure it out.
That's ultimately what I feel like is mean, in all seriousness. But because here's the thing, Greg Sankey is the go-to, right? We talked about how Kirby Smart is the go-to for all SEC coaches and how to handle transfer portals and NIL and all that stuff. Mostly he's just saying, hey, man, I ain't got nothing to do with that, but I got something to do with that. So I think overall, just the SEC, they've always been the lead dog. They've always been, the conference that to look to as far as the money makers and as far as the depth of talent that they have that they put into the NFL. So yeah, they are the poster child for, being able to make those decisions and being able to be looked to lead the NCAA or whatever the entity is that's going to be overseeing all this foolishness and craziness into the future.
Yeah. And Brian, I feel like when you think about those words, leadership role, it's almost like there's an underlying meaning there, because obviously we know that they are the leaders and everything kind of goes through the SEC. But I feel like there is also a subliminal message saying, yeah, and we'll be ultimately making the decision one way or the other on the direction and the future of college football and college sports overall.
Yeah, it's one of those you can see, hey, we're already taking over football. Let us take over basketball too while we're here. Like, we can do it. We're already doing it. We already got basketball teams and all of that. I do think it'll be one of those like, hey, we'll take a leadership role, but I think they're going to kind of bring the Big Ten along with them, because then again, when you count all those Big Ten teams, a lot of them are traditional or not traditional, but also basketball schools too. And then you add all the West Coast teams too that are coming in as well. What's crazy about this is the fact that it could be the SEC, maybe be the leader in hoops. And just think about that going back 5-10 years. Probably don't even have to go back as far as 10 years to the fact that, like, wait, the ACC is not going to be the one that's going to be running the hoops conversation and having this conversation, and all those Carolina schools, like, they're not going to be the ones that are going to run this. And it's almost like in the back, I wonder if they're sitting there going, man, we should have been doing basketball the whole time and figuring this out on the side and doing this.
Right. This amount of money? Ooh.
Yeah, we already have the structure in place of, like, we're running stuff now. We're big bad SEC. We got the TV money. Big Ten's got their money. Yeah, let us just take this thing over again. So it's just another power dynamic, and it's wild to see what actually winds up happening and how involved Sankey gets on the basketball front.
And, JD, that's a perfect segue that BG just made about that basketball piece, because he mentions it. And I don't think that was by accident that he mentioned March Madness in there, talking about the fact that that's what binds the schools together, but with a little bit of a caveat. So is March Madness being the tie that binds really enough to keep D1 together? Or is that more of a tie that binds between, hey, we're a powerhouse in college football, we're becoming a powerhouse in college basketball, and that is why we as the SEC should take the lead? Is that kind of what Sankey was going for?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, because hey, Sankey, is he going to be the new commissioner of NCAA? Like, hey man, I'm up next. You know what Mark Emmert was, and the current guy, I can't even think of his name. He's so insignificant.
Exactly. You're like Charlie, but
Charlie Warner,
yeah.
who is the commissioner of the NCAA right now? Nobody knows. Greg Sankey, yeah. If
Right.
for a layman, who don't really pay attention to college sports like that, you would think so, because he's the one that actually getting out and saying something and there's stuff that makes sense, right? And NCAA, all you hear about them when they come out and speak is just, oh, amateur athletes and all this blah, blah, blah. Nah, Greg Sankey is talking about what everybody else is talking about, saying, hey, man, we need to start, taking some ownership of this and start taking steps forward and having foresight to look ahead and say, you know what? This is probably what's on the horizon, and here's what we need to do going forward so we can prevent whatever we don't want to happen going forward.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was almost like what you would call a bit of a preemptive strike, because they kind of know, I mean, SEC knows where it is. It knows what it wants to do. It knows how it wants things to be framed for going forward. So I kind of feel like everything, and we know everything they do is calculated. We understand that, but it's everything that they say, we're kind of trying to figure out what's the one step closer to where they ultimately want to be, and are they giving us a little bit of insight into that? And speaking of wanting to be one step closer to where they want to be, Tennessee would like to be one step closer to where they want to be, which is taking Georgia off the hill, but that ain't it, because recently Kirby Smart, well, I would say potentially Kirby Smart will be able to remind them of exactly who is on the hill. So there's a 4-star safety, Lagonza Hayward, that Tennessee has been looking like for months and months and months they're going to land, right? This kid is 6'1", 200 pounds, out of Lyons, Georgia, ranked as the number 10 safety in the nation, number 12 player in the state of Georgia. All of a sudden, he then makes his visit to Athens this past weekend, and waters have muddied a bit. According to him, he didn't really know how Georgia felt about him before the visit, but they showed a lot of love all weekend. That's courtesy of On3. They showed me I am wanted, and Georgia moved up my list. Can you imagine if Georgia's able to get this just as a one-up? But for me, it wasn't even just about getting this guy. It's the fact that it's such a well-oiled machine that Kirby Smart has that he can literally flip a kid in a matter of a weekend.
Yeah. Don't let him get him on campus. Don't let Kirby get him on campus. Kirby's one of those ones like, don't let Kirby bring him on a first date, because there's going to be a second date. There's going to be a third date. Like, don't let it happen, Yeah. I mean, and you bring them there, and then you have this whole thing where you've got this, and I know we'll get to it later, but you have this whole vibe of what's going on with baseball this weekend and bringing them on campus. And then you get them around these other kids where it's like, you're not the only one of this caliber. In fact, we've got a bunch of people here already. Excuse me. And the article you sent us, T2, really highlighted that. Like, I want to go in and I want to compete. I want to iron sharpen iron, and I want to go against the best and do all that. And while there's some really good players at Tennessee, it's not at that level. So Kirby can come in and go, all right, see this guy that just got drafted, and this guy that just got drafted, and this guy, and I've been doing this for 20 years. Look at all the different people that I've had and under this system, and you could be the next guy. And so it's just, if you're these other schools right now, you can't let them take that trip to Athens,
Yeah, look at Malachi. Look, he can look at Malachi Starks. He's like, hey, man, look, this man about to be a top 15 prospect, probably going first round next year. So, sir, if you want to go, it's an easy pitch, right? You talk about development, and the one thing that's really cool about Kirby, and I really respect him for, he literally comes out and says, we are a high school recruiting program. Like, when you think about that, just think about what Colorado and what Prime tries to do every year. Like, that's my dog. I love him to death. But man, this dude's trying to pick out the transfer portal every year. You talking about the environment, like that can get real muddy. The waters can get real muddy when you're talking about going to the transfer portal every year to try to sustain some type of competition. As far as to be able to go out there every year. Yeah, so I think, Kirby is doing it the right way. This man down there in Toombs County and went down there to Athens and, probably saw some stuff or heard some things that's probably going to change this man's life. This man already talking about getting a second and third contract in the NFL. So, yeah,
Right.
I think, Josh Heupel better get his stuff together.
Yeah, because you're absolutely, he was talking about that in the article, like just the foresight, like the future thinking and saying, hey, I'm not really about that NFL life at the end of the day. Well, I mean, the NIL life. I'm about that NFL life.
Yep.
I really liked how he talked about the development piece. And we all know, BG, that if there's one thing Kirby Smart is focused on, it's 100% development. And that is probably his number one recruiting chip, if not, well, it is. I think it's his number one recruiting chip.
Yeah, and also the line that he used in terms of getting to that second and third contract, that sounds like something that's straight out of Kirby Smart's mouth. Like, I heard it this weekend. It's a quote. It's going up on my wall. Like, this guy's not talking about developing my freshman year in college. This man's talking about my third NFL contract.
Yes.
And I like the way that he's talking about this.
Me too.
Yes. And the other thing with this too is, he's an in-state recruit, which is, again, that's something Kirby gets him from everywhere. He gets them from all over the country, but he's preached from the time he's been on campus there in Athens. I'm going to win the state. We're going to win the in-state. He wants to win those in-state recruits first, and this is one of those pieces. So if they can swing this kid from Tennessee, that'd be another just great look for Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs.
Indeed. Now, Georgia's 2024 schedule, it's really a gauntlet with all those guys that he has from the state of Georgia and the recruiting efforts there, but even all over the place, they've got their work cut out for them this 2024 season. We're going to go between the hedges in a minute to discuss. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more in the NBA, but also in the NHL. So right now, for the NBA, the series props have Boston Celtics at -220, the Dallas Mavericks at +184. It also gives odds on finals MVP, which Jason Tatum is -125, Luka Doncic +200, Jaylen Brown +700, and Kyrie Irving +2,000. Now swinging it over to the NHL, you're down to the Edmonton Oilers and the Florida Panthers. The spread for Edmonton is +1.5. The money line's +106. And for the Panthers, it's -1.5. And the money line is -128. So you got an opportunity there to make some big bucks, both on the NBA and NHL side. If you visit FanDuel.com/locked-on, you can then make every playoff shot count. Again, that's FanDuel.com/locked-on to make every playoff shot count, because FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. All right, guys, as we know, we are 24/7, but we got to let everybody else know that we are 24/7 as well. Locked On Sports Today is a free 24/7 sports streaming channel that's programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the background noise. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So now it's time to go between the hedges. ESPN released their 2024 Football Power Index, or FPI, ratings and projections, which included forecasts for every team's record, its chances of winning a conference title, and its probability to not just make the playoff, but win the national championship. No surprise, Georgia's at the top of the FPI rankings, but they also took a look at the best and most important games of the season and quantified that ranking by basically looking at those combined ratings of all the schools in their top 20. BG, Georgia is in 5 of the 20 biggest games on the 2024 schedule, according to this FPI, including 4 of the top 10. Did ESPN get the order right in terms of the Dogs having, my God, the most impactful game to its 5th most impactful? Crazy.
Yeah, I think they did get it right, especially, when you look at overall, you have Georgia at Texas and Georgia at Bama as the 1 and 2 overall games that have the biggest impact. So I think that that's accurate. The other 2, so I think they mainly got it right. I think the thing that I would pick apart is the 3rd and 4th games. I would actually probably have Georgia at Ole Miss a little higher, and I would have Georgia against Clemson here in Atlanta a little bit lower, just because I I don't know. Every other day we have some weird Dabo video, and he seems like he's aging like 5 years a day, and he's completely losing it. I mean, it just seems like so weird. We seem like we're so far removed from Clemson being what they were. So I would move that Clemson game down a good bit, and I would move that Georgia at Ole Miss game up a good bit there as well. But I think that they got it right as far as those two most important games. Georgia at Texas is kind of becoming the game of the year, assuming that everybody takes care of business up until that point. And that's gonna be a really exciting game there in Austin.
Yeah, when you think about like just the away schedule for the Bulls all this year, it's going to be tough. It's going to be really tough because you're talking about Alabama and Texas, and Quinn Ewers and what he's going to be able to bring to the table. Those are some of the things that Jalen Milroe. We understand what he was able to do against Georgia last year. I just look at the quarterback. You got to start with the quarterbacks. And when you talk about Quinn Ewers, who's going to be potentially a first round pick, I don't necessarily think Jalen Milroe should be in there at this moment, but he can play his way into that, given how he plays in these big games, especially against games against Georgia, and the severity and all the eyeballs are going to be on there. So I think that, of course, yes, they got it right, when you think about from that standpoint.
Yeah, I would agree as well. I think that if you're looking at kind of some of their variables that they talked about, or their criteria, if you will, they kind of focused on the other teams and what those teams' records could potentially be. But to your point, I think they also kind of looked at, okay, who is under center? Because oftentimes that's exactly what kind of makes or breaks. But on that same token, I would agree with Brian. I think that when I look at the list of, hey, these are the most impactful games, if you will, I think that you could, kind of make the case of, well, I don't know about, I think Georgia at Texas, yeah, number one, that's no question. Georgia at Alabama probably is going to be number one, because we don't really know kind of what this Alabama team is going to be, but we have a sneaking suspicion it's going to be good. And maybe the most important piece of what makes that a good game is at Alabama. That's a little bit different when you're in Bryant-Denny versus when you are at Sanford Stadium. So I think that's a critical piece. But yeah, I also agree with you guys as well, that maybe if I looked at Georgia at Ole Miss and Georgia at Clemson, if nothing else, I kind of flip those, PG.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be my thought. And what's interesting too about this list, if you take a look at the non-Georgia games, some of the ones that have dropped, like looking at Bama at LSU, that used to be the game every year. That was the one that CBS would have the night game, have its own separate broadcast. We're doing a whole new thing. Like 3:30, you get the B team, we get the A team primetime kind of thing, and then Michigan at Ohio State. You can tell by these rankings and the data and everything that Michigan has dropped really far just in terms of perception, which most likely will be the case, but it's just kind of wild to see them just like, all right, like Harbaugh's gone, McCarthy's gone, a handful of other guys as well. And it's like this team, they're basically saying this program isn't the same anymore. So it's just kind of weird to see that further down there. And then Texas at Oklahoma, I feel like is kind of high as well. But if you look at it, it feels like it's very weighted in the sense of if you are playing one of those elite teams. So the Georgia, Texas, Ohio State, Oregon games, that's why you see them almost comprise the entire list. But it's interesting to see Bama and LSU down there and Michigan and Ohio State down there, because over the last 5 years, those have been two of the biggest games, if not the biggest games, every single season.
Yeah, and I wonder if there's a little bit of, go ahead, Jarvis.
No, I feel like I was going to say that Oregon is an interesting one because, you had Bo Nix, who was there for like 12 years, and then they brought in Dillian Gabriel, who's been there for like 12 years as well. So, like Dan Lanning say, hey, man, I need experience and I need one-hit wonders. I'm going into free agency and going to go get a quarterback. So I think, Oregon's going to be in the conversation as well. When you think about, first year, in a new conference and what they're going to be able to bring to the table. Hey, because the Pac-12 had a really good season last year, and for a long time they weren't respected. So for them to kind of start getting some of the respect, in these preseason rankings, it's kind of interesting to see.
Yeah, put a little respect on their name, at least from the football perspective, maybe not the conference overall. Real quick, guys, you just talked about it, BG. You talked about that old Bama at LSU game and how it used to be one of those marquee matchups. And I think it was a marquee matchup, especially when it was in Baton Rouge, because Death Valley is nothing to play with. So EA Sports named college football's 3 toughest places to play, including LSU, Penn State, and Georgia in that order. Are the 2 Death Valleys more difficult than going between the hedges? No pun intended, of course.
Yeah, I'll take this one. I've actually been I've been to all three, so I feel like I'm pretty well qualified to speak about this. I've been to a bunch of the SEC ones. There is no place rowdier. Like LSU is almost in its own tier. Like it's just like it's by itself. Like I've never experienced anything like it. The environment, the atmosphere, the pregame, the going in, the rowdiness of the crowd, how they were in it from the get-go. It was incredible. Anybody who asks in terms of, hey, what SEC stadium should I go to? I'm like, well, come on to Athens and we'll go, hang out. We'll try to go see the game or whatever. But really, it's LSU. Like, go to LSU if you only have a choice to go to one. So that would be there. And then Penn State. I went for like a kind of a lesser Big Ten matchup. It was one of those like they beat up on Rutgers, so it was one of the game was rainy, so the atmosphere was hard to get. But you saw like the whiteout and the atmosphere and just kind of the vibe of it. So I'd almost like to go back for a bigger game. And then Sanford's become that over the last 3, 4, 5 years. It wasn't always that, and that's been pretty well documented. But the real turning point for me was the Arkansas game a couple years ago with a noon kickoff. That sounded like it was the national title game. I mean, that thing was just rowdy. And then it even went up a different level when Georgia hosted Tennessee, and it was the 1 versus 3, and it was in the rain, and everybody stayed. Kirby goes back to that one all the time and talks and credits the crowd and everything. So I think they got this list right, but I think if they did this 2 or 3 years ago, Sanford Stadium wouldn't be in this list. And maybe you could swap out Penn State probably for an Ohio State if you wanted to get it's a Big Ten representation, but I've never personally been to the shoe. Would like to get there at some point.
Yeah, I think, there's nothing like a game at night down there and down there at LSU. And it's just different. It's a different atmosphere. When you think about all the guys that have come through there, Patrick Peterson and Tyrann Mathieu and the DBU and then Joe Burrow and with Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase on the same squad. How in the hell did that happen? Those guys just lighting up the scoreboard. You just think about all of those times where when it was a night game, everybody was watching. You had to watch. You had no choice because the atmosphere was just so electric. So yeah, I think Death Valley should be number one regardless of any affiliation that I have to any college.
Exactly. Just a reminder, as a Louisiana native, it's just an extension of what we do. I mean, point blank. Yeah, everything's a party. Everything is a party, and it's no different at Death Valley and Baton Rouge. The Dogs one-upped the Jackets again. We'll talk about that in Next Up. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by LinkedIn. Now, when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and free because it's not like a regular old job board. It helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the right role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. And on LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. That's because LinkedIn knows your small business is wearing many hats, and they give you really innovative ways to make the process easier for you. They just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, and it must be working because 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. So you can post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. So guys, it's one of those things where, how in life you realize that there's always going to be something that triggers you. Like I know for sure for Jarvis, it's for Valley State. And I'm going to assume that for you, Brian, as a Georgia fan, it could be Alabama, it could be Tennessee, it could be Florida, but it's one of those three that triggers, right? Well, I think overall for Dog Nation, it's Georgia Tech. Or may I say, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. For Yellow Jacket Nation, it's Georgia because once again, not only do they kick your in football, they beat you down in basketball this year. And darn it, now they've gone to the Diamond and it beat you as well. So it's like Georgia Tech just cannot win for losing, BG. Georgia stung Tech. Yep, that was corny, but hey, that's what the headline read. in a dramatic 8-6 win that's now sending UGA to the NCAA Super Regionals. So however you slice it, whether it's another showing of Charlie Condon and his greatness, or Georgia returning to its previous form as a powerhouse in baseball, or if you're just petty and you just wanted them to beat Georgia Tech, you got all three this past weekend.
I'm here for all the puns, T. I'm here for all the corny dad jokes. I love all that stuff, so I'm here for it. It was so fun. I mean, it was like I talked to so many people this weekend that watched college baseball for maybe the first time this year, the first time in 5 years, the first time in 10 years. Like, they actually brought people to, okay, they're playing, and then especially when they're playing Georgia Tech, because there's even that in-state, okay, they're in the region, whatever, and exciting games come back and forth. And the vibe and the atmosphere at Foley Field was awesome. You saw that thing was packed out. They had the Kudzu Hill thing going on. You had some of the football players were standing on top of the indoor facility watching the game as they could see it too. So, like, the fact that you have that going on there right now is just awesome. And anytime you can beat Tech, it's great. I mean, they're little brother in football, but now it's little brother, and it's becoming some of these other sports too, which I know drives Tech fans crazy because they've been historically really good at baseball and produced some very, very good players that have gone on to have great MLB careers as well. But Georgia sent a message. They found a way to win in extras there, and they swept the regionals and now on to the super regionals. So hopefully they can keep this thing going.
Indeed.
Yeah, I think that this is really cool to see. Georgia going to be facing NC State. Last time they were in this, in this predicament, they were going against NC State. I think it was back in 2008. So when you think about that, it's like, oh man, we've been here before. So hey, we can get this thing done. And I just think the story of Wes Johnson being in his first year, and then Charlie Condon being a walk-on, and could potentially be a top 5 pick in the 2024 MLB draft. That is cool as crap. That's some good stuff right there. Like, you talking about easy recruiting tools, because we talked about how Kirby has come into prominence from a recruiting standpoint, a development standpoint. Hey, getting the guys to the next level. In year one, that is when you're talking about, hey, this is just poster board stuff that, hey, you can just put out there, come hither, all you recruits, because we're going to go do our doggone thing, and we're going to win this bad boy if you come down here.
Yeah. And it goes to what we say all the time, which is establishing a winning culture. You can point to that. And I mean, winning culture also means having fun with it, right? So being able to show, I think that's a really great call on your part, BG, just being able to show the baseball players that, hey, the potential recruits, we got your back. Because look, we had players standing on top of the indoor space just to be able to see the game. I think all of those things just kind of play into the atmosphere that's created within the sports program at UGA. So another win, not just for the baseball squad, but really for Josh Brooks' program across the board overall. And speaking of that, we're going to kind of shift gears a little bit, because we didn't quite get what we were hoping for. We talked about it on last week's show, that maybe Anthony Edwards and company could do some type of miraculous comeback against the Dallas Mavericks. But unfortunately, Ant-Man and the Timberwolves were not able to kind of pull it off as we hoped. But there's still a Georgia guy who's somewhere in there for Jaylen Brown, who obviously didn't go to UGA. But I asked the question because I think a lot of us, including probably Ant-Man, were kind of rooting for the Georgia guy in some way, shape, or form. And as we talked about with FanDuel, he has the 3rd best odds to win MVP for the NBA Finals. You think finally they'll be able to get it done with a guy who's from Georgia?
They got to be able to do it this time. If they can't do it, they should have beat the Warriors a couple years ago. And Jaylen Brown's been playing. I mean, he's just been playing so well.
Yeah.
So, but this is, I mean, the Celtics got to breeze through the East based on the injuries and everything. Like, that was a cakewalk to be able to get to the finals for the season they had, the depth they have, the team that they have. My thing is, like, damn, can we get this game going? Can we get it played? Because it's been so long since we've watched an NBA playoff game, and we still got to wait 2 days until this thing gets started. I hate that they do the predetermined thing. Like, I mean, I get it because of I get it a little bit, but at the same time, you gotta have at least like plan B. You gotta have plan B to like wiggle back, like get back and like there should be a game tonight. We should watch an NBA Finals game tonight. You know, give us that. We need something. It's June, so
yeah, exactly. Like you're talking about. Like that's the one thing that I feel like there are a lot of things that the NBA I feel gets right when it comes to social conscious and allowing players to have a voice and and speak their minds when it comes to certain things that are very important to them. But when it comes to just scheduling, oh my gosh, why does the season have to be so doggone long? Like when they start the doggone playoffs in March, and here we are. Beginning of June, we still haven't started the NBA finals. So that is absolutely madness. I remember, growing up watching these things, it was just games every night. And I was just like, NBA glutton. Like, and I loved it. The fact that they're spreading this thing out, it's just so whack to me because when you think about, Anthony Edwards, getting bounced out of the playoffs. And now I'm up here following along with Cameron, having something to say about his commercial. I'm just like, man, I don't want to watch all that. I want to watch that after the season, the finals and all that stuff is over. Like now I'm trying to find storylines about the NBA. And I'm up here watching Cameron do a freestyle about Anthony Edwards and and all this crap. I'm like, man, come on, man. Come on, Adam Silver. Come on, I need you. Get it right, man.
Well, that's why and you know what? Shout out to college football for taking the opportunity to put themselves right in the middle of the narrative. So while you're waiting and delaying for 10 days, this Georgia football party and so many other shows are talking about, guess what? College football. So the NCAA thanks you for the laps that you've given them to promote what college football is doing right now. And we appreciate you guys as well for stopping by the Atlanta Football Party, your home for the best Georgia Bulldogs football talk. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And of course, get us free and available wherever you download your podcast. We'll see you on the Atlanta Sports Party Thursday.